All right, guys, it's Loren Landow here for another installment of Elite Sports University Interview. I'm joined here today by a gentleman who's amazing in our field. If you haven't looked him up, if you don't know who he is, I urge you to look him up. His name is Joel Jamieson. I was introduced to Joel through various people who kept telling me that the work that Joel was doing on energy system development was truly cutting edge, or what he was really doing is he was taking a lot of the unknowns or the confusing factors of energy system development, and he was really making it, one, simplistic to understand, but two, from a practical aspect, how to split the onion a little bit further in each energy system to develop certain qualities. Joel is, he's sought after from fighters all over the world and coaches all over the world with the work that he does with his MMA athletes and his kickboxers. But I know Joel's got a extensive background, and I think went from football to now where he's at with the MMA side of things. So, Joel, thank you for joining us today. Why don't you give our viewers a little bit of rundown of kind of the path you took and what's got you to where you are today?
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, as you mentioned, the funny thing was my whole career started in strength and power, and the first strength coach I worked under was a guy named Bill Gillespie, who, if anyone out there knows Gillespie, he's a 800-pound bencher. I mean, the guy could bench a Mack truck if it was over top of him. And that was really where I got started, and that was University of Washington weight room back in the early 2000s. And I kind of saw my career going football, strength, power, kind of traditional track. I went to the Seahawks for a little bit, then opened my own facility, and just kind of happenstance, I opened up next to an MMA facility. And at the time, MMA was totally underground. I mean, I had guys like Maurice Smith, Randy Couture. Yeah, exactly. Like I spent 4 days with Dan, and that guy is a hell of a coach. I've probably been as more impressed with Pap as I have anybody out there. The guy is a hell of a coach.
Yeah, I go back, when I get back from New Zealand, I go back down there to present to Altus and then spend a full week down. So I'm excited to get back down.
Have you spent time with Dan before?
I did. I was there a year ago. It was actually, funny enough, it was right after you were down there, and I saw a couple of the tweets going on that you were there presenting to their staff. And I reached out to Nick Hume and I said, hey, how does somebody get involved with this? I said, if you'll come down and present to our staff, we'll give you a free week down here. So I was like, shit, let's do it.
Yeah, Dan's amazing. What those guys do down there is second to none.
Well, the nonverbal communication, the communication within the coaches, I was so impressed with. Well, hey, we're back on now, so we'll go ahead and pick up where we left off. I think I was just you were finishing up about the practicality side of the ultimate conditioning for martial arts.
Yep.
So I'll take it into our next point here, and I want to ask you a little bit about some of the mentors to you early on, and then later as your career has gone on. Who do you seek out? Who do you find yourself listening to and paying attention to as a coach?
Like I said, early on, my first mentor was a guy named Bill Gillespie, and he was strength coach at University of Washington. He'd been there for, I think, 15 years at the time, massive power lifter. And the most impressive thing about Bill is his willingness to keep learning and to keep an open mind. I mean, I was literally like a 20-year-old kid, coming down the weight room, and I'd read a lot of Russian stuff, and I really didn't know what the hell I was talking about. I just had a lot of ideas and theories. And Bill really just welcomed me in and said, you're welcome to intern here and work with our teams. And he and I would talk shop about training for hours on end, and he was just incredibly open to somebody. I was literally a nobody. He'd been in the field for 20 years, and he was asking me about training ideas and having me go research things to bring back to him. So it really just impressed upon me the importance of continuing to learn and being open to learning from anybody. I mean, a lot of coaches out there, they think they've got it all figured out, and the last thing they're going to do is listen to an intern. And here I was, talking training with a guy who'd been in the field for almost as long as I'd been alive at the time. So I went from there. Another great coach I got to work under was Kent Johnston at the Seahawks. He'd been in the NFL for, I think, 17 or 18 years at a time. He'd been with Green Bay and Tampa Bay and won Super Bowls. So it was just really cool to see the way he conducted himself, the way he ran things. He was using video analysis in his coaching back in like 2001, 2002. He was way ahead of the game in active release. And was talking about Dan Papp all the way back then. I mean, he was a great guy, ahead of the curve, and a hell of a coach. And then another great guy I've been able to work with is Matt Hume. Who's I would say there's no better MMA coach in the world, hands down. He's the best there is. And got to see him take Demetrius Johnson from a beginner up to world champion, and seen him coach Haja Sakurai and Ivan Salivary and many guys in the sport, and just watch the way he's interacted with the athletes, how he coaches them, and been able to see that. So I've been fortunate to be around a lot of great coaches. I saw Mike Holmgren when I was with the Seahawks. So I've seen a lot of really high-level coaches coaching a lot of high-level athletes, and tried to always learn from how they do it, what they say, how they say it, what they don't say, their overall approach, their philosophy, all that sort of stuff. So I've probably taken as much from the sports skills coaches as I have strength skills coaches, and just looking at how people interact with their athletes, I think is kind of the unwritten side of coaching that you really can't read in a book. You have to just see it and be around great coaches to get a lot out of it.
Well, I agree with you, and it's funny you bring up Kent Johnson's name, and I had a couple Seahawks players back in the day, early 2000s, and I would send programming up to them, and Kent would call me up and, hey bud, ask me,
Yeah,
he would,
buddy.
hey
Yeah.
buddy, and he would ask me, hey, I love this, I love what you're doing with this exercise, and tell me what you're doing here. And as a young kid myself at that time, or as younger in the field, it really impressed upon me, wow, here's this coach who's been in the NFL for all these years, and he's actually asking my opinion on this certain subject. It was flattering on one end, but it also gave me a sense of the humble and humility aspect that we should have as coaches, because there's so many variables in this industry and things are always changing. So it was an early lesson for me. But Kent, the relationship with Kent is how I met Dan Paff.
Yep, that's how I heard. I mean, that's where I heard Dan Paff as well. Like I said, he was Kent was literally going down to hang out with Dan when he was back in Texas. I mean, this is 2002 or 3. I mean, I'd never heard the name, and he was doing all this movement stuff with Dan. I mean, it was just like I said, it was light years ahead of the game. But like you said, even though these guys were so far ahead in one area, they were still open-minded and willing to listen to people and ask questions. And I think that's the biggest thing I've got all my mentors is they don't think they've got it all figured out. They have their system, they have their philosophy, but they're always adding. They're always trying to learn. They're always trying to get new perspectives. And I think that's one of the biggest things that every coach can learn from, is that you've never got it figured out. There's always ways to improve, and the more you're willing to work at that, the better coach you're going to be in the long run.
Right, the I got it syndrome, and the mentality of a younger coach typically, or even some older coaches fall into that trap as well. It's so stifling to your growth and your learning. So that's a great point. Now, I want to actually take a quick spin to I've heard you talk a few times about Matt Hume, and every time you talk about him, like there's nobody else on the planet like him. What is it that makes him so special when we look at mixed martial artists? Maybe how he teaches or coaches, or maybe it's how he blends all the skills together.
I mean, the biggest thing with Matt is he understands MMA as a whole better than I think any other coach out there. There's so many coaches out there that are really good at striking, or they're really good at grappling, or maybe they're really good at wrestling. Matt is good at literally all of it. And not only can Matt understand it, Matt can do it. I mean, if you watch Matt roll or spar or do stand-up with any of these guys at the highest level, he will beat the crap out of them. I mean, he can trash DJ, to be honest. I mean, he literally can take guys. I've seen with the first time he rolled with Rich Franklin looked around and said, I hope no one saw that. Guy just got embarrassed. I mean, Matt's ability to actually do all the things that he's teaching is second to none. And then secondly, he understands the game. He watches the opponents. He can break them down in ways that you've never imagined. It's literally like watching John Madden break down a football play. I mean, his ability to put all the pieces together, to coach all the pieces together, and to teach the transitions and the seamless interactions. He is really a total MMA coach. I think there's a lot of great boxing coaches, a lot of great jiu-jitsu coaches, a lot of great grappling coaches in general, but he is an MMA coach above all else. And his ability to get the most out of his athletes, to come up with the right game plan, and develop the athletes from the ground up is something that I've never seen before. I mean, he literally took Josh Barnett, who was an overweight high school wrestler, and turned him into the UFC world champion, beat Randy Couture. He took Demetrius Johnson, who again was a talented athlete, but again, he's just a high school wrestler with no other background, and made him the best fighter in the world. So he's taken the heaviest weight guy and made him a world champion beginner, and he's taken the lightest weight guy to the best in the world from a beginner. And it's rare do you see someone who's been able to take two complete beginners and to shape their entire career and to be the best in the world. And he's, like I said, he's done it twice, not to mention all the other athletes he's worked with in between. So I just think his overall grasp of the game and his ability to coach and see all the little things that no one else sees, it's literally unbelievable. I mean, he doesn't have other coaches doing all the work for him. He is coaching. He's doing the ground game, the stand-up game, the kickboxing, the strategy. I mean, he is it. He is the entire picture of MMA with the athletes he works with. And anyone else who's worked with you, I worked with him before, will tell you there's just nobody out there who can put together like him.
Well, I mean that speaks volume of his system. His system works. If you take somebody that has this background of high school wrestling and turn him into maybe the best pound for pound fighter in the world, in a guy like Demetrius Johnson. So let's actually talk about DJ a little bit here as well.
Sure.
Some people will be familiar with MMA that watch this podcast. Not everybody, but for those who don't know, Demetrius Johnson is maybe the most dominant fighter that we've ever seen in the UFC, and you've been able to work with him. It sounds like maybe his entire career. Can you talk a little bit about when you first starting with working with DJ and to where he is now?
Well, the interesting thing is for the first, I want to say 3 to 4 years of his career, maybe he lived about an hour away, and he trained during the week at a different gym. So it was more, when he was first getting started, it was more just helping his coaches that were working with him on a daily basis fill some of the holes. I mean, they wanted to know how to improve his strength a little bit and power a little bit, and it was just kind of consulting and kind of giving them some tips here and there. He didn't actually move to work at AMC, the AMC with Matt full time until I believe it was just before the Dominic Cruz fight, or maybe just after the Dominic Cruz fight. So he spent the first half of his career just kind of coming up on the weekends, and you could see the talent. I mean, I used to judge the fights back then, so I judged all of Matt's amateur fights, and so I judged DJ's first fights. And the biggest thing that Matt did with him is he would do a boxing match, and then he would have him do a kickboxing match, and then he would have him do grappling tournaments. He kept doing all these different areas of MMA where he saw DJ's needed to improve, and then he would just focus those areas until DJ was better in those areas. So early on, I was able to judge a lot of Matt's fights, and so I was, literally, I was sitting there in a corner judging DJ's boxing matches and his MMA matches early on. And you could see the talent there. You could see that he had a lot of tools that he was going to be able to develop. And Matt said there's only 2 people in the world he's ever told they were going to be world champion, and DJ's one, and Josh Barnett was the other. So,
Wow.
Again, Matt's ability to recognize, he told DJ that, I think, within the first 6 months of his training. So
Wow.
Matt's ability to recognize that talent there is, again, part of what makes him an amazing coach. But really, you saw the biggest transition in DJ's game when he was able to quit his job. He was working a full-time job and training at a gym an hour away until the Dominic Cruz fight. That was the first time he was able to actually start training full-time. And once you saw that, he quit his job and started working full-time with Matt, came to AMC every day. And you can see the exponential growth, since that first Dominic Cruz fight to now. You've just seen him mature. You've seen him put all the pieces together. He's physically as gifted as there is. He's incredibly tough mentally. You literally have to tell him to stop training rather than try to get him to keep training. So he's just, to me, he's the most complete athlete in the game. He's not just a stand-up guy. He's not just a wrestling guy. He's not just a ground guy. He's good at literally all of it, and he puts the pieces together. I mean, to me, he's the best representation of Matt's system. And he's the evolution of Matt's system to where it is now. You see, again, he can beat you in any number of ways. You saw his last fight. He went in the clinch of the wrestler and beat the crap out of him
With a gold medalist.
With a gold medalist, exactly. And that's the difference between a wrestler and an MMA fighter. And again, that's purely the result of Matt. I mean, it's literally just Matt's game being executed the way Matt wanted it to be executed, and you see the results.
Now, with your system, did a guy like DJ or any of your fighters, was there ever resistance to anything that you wanted to implement, or here's the direction we're going to take it? Were the fighters kind of set in their way with how they thought training should be, and then maybe you had to really try to convince them, or was it Matt said, hey, I trust this guy implicitly, and the guys just listened to you? How was that communication?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally Matt's word. Matt is all that matters, and it's always been a team effort. It's never been my program and Matt's program. It's just, this is the program, and this is how things are running. You kind of, if you don't buy into the philosophy, you're probably not going to last long in the gym anyway.
Right.
So if you've got an athlete who's questioning what you're doing and doesn't want to go along with it, he's not going to be a part of the system for long. So again, it's Matt's show, and I just try to help out in any way that I can, and we've always had a great relationship, and I know what he's doing. He knows what they're doing in my gym. It's going back to Dan Path thing. If you look at Dan coach athletes, it's not like 5 different coaches doing 5 different things. It's everybody working together for the same goal, and that's always the way it's been. It's the strength conditioning program is part of the MMA program, and everyone knows exactly what's going on. It's a one program. It's not 3 different programs or 2 different programs. And that's, again, one of the biggest advantages I think we've had is DJ doesn't have to go around to 5 different coaches and 5 different gyms. Everything is in one spot. Everything is one program, and that's difficult to replicate, but it's also important to realize the benefits of that.
Well, and obviously the success that follows that's pretty evident. And I think that's what we run into in the MMA world is that, so many people on the strength and conditioning side, if they haven't taken the time to talk to those coaches and to really go to those practices and see the intensity levels or the demands of those practices, you see so many strength and conditioning coaches who are just smashing and killing these athletes because they think, 5 minutes of high intensity work, let's go. And they end up hurting these guys or really decreasing their efficiency and their capabilities to perform. So and that's why a book like yours and maybe even a podcast like this is so crucial to some of these younger coaches to open up their eyes to say, okay, what you think the sport is versus what it really is in preparation.
Yeah, I mean, you really, for a young coach getting in the field, the best advice is treat them like an in-season athlete because they basically are.
Yeah.
They're spending 5, 10, even 15 hours, a week training their sport. I mean, they're spending as much time in MMA, again, as a football player would be in season or a basketball player. You can't assume that your 4 days of strength conditioning on top of their 5 to 6 days of MMA training is something they're going to survive. So treat them like they're an in-season athlete for all intents and purposes because they basically are. And the closer and closer they get to the fight, the more that's going to intensify, and the less you should be doing on your end, the more you should be letting the MMA training take care of itself. Just maintain their strength, keep them healthy, do the injury prevention stuff, just mobility, recovery, regeneration, and let their sport be the primary training means because they're spending so much time in it. You just can't add and add and add, and that's the biggest mistake. I'm sure you've seen a million times is it's not because the strength coaches don't want to help. Obviously they do. It's just because they're trying to do too much.
Yep.
They think that if they don't work them hard that they're not doing their job. But the reality is if you're sparring 2-3 days a week in the gym and doing all your skill work in between, I mean that is a massive amount of training. Human body can only take so much work.
Yeah, but you can't recover. And that's one thing I always talk about to coaches is know your role. And once you know your role, it really becomes pretty easy. Like you said, let's maintain strength through camp, let's mobility, stability, and make sure that they're ready for their tactical sessions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if all your training is taken away from their tactical sessions, you're ultimately hurting them more than you're helping them, even though you might have the best intentions. Less is generally more. When a guy's in camp, keep him healthy and let him spar and let him do his drills and let him train. If you can keep him healthy enough to do that, you've done your job.
Will you do me a favor now? So we've talked a little bit on Demetrius, but it doesn't have to be Demetrius. But will you walk us through maybe that last week leading up to the night of the fight? I mean, clearly you've cornered in plenty of championship fights, and there's a different element of stress and excitement that comes along with that. But maybe you can walk through just like the week. Obviously we get into town typically on a Tuesday for a UFC fight. Maybe our listeners would like to hear what your mindset is as a coach for optimal preparation for one of your athletes.
Yeah, and again, keep in mind here, going back to know your role, I mean, Matt's been doing this for 30 years, right? I mean, it's really about supporting the overall game plan and what Matt has seen work and perfected over time and time again. The biggest things I'll kind of walk through with you that we've seen work and that have obviously paid off is number one, being consistent in what you do. So we get into Monday or Tuesday, the first thing that we'll do is find the restaurants that Matt wants to have the foods that are important for making weight. Getting into the training routine, we typically train more than most people do during fight week. I mean, DJ's hitting pads or rolling 2 to 3 times a day, a lot of times during fight week because he spent 8 weeks training consistently. You can't just cut training completely out. You need to stay on top of it, but it's very small amounts. So typically, like I said, it's getting in the routine of the nutrition, it's getting your sleep schedule down, it's moving and being active and training and hitting pads and just keeping that mindset. You have to keep those skill sets sharp. You can't just take a week off of training. So usually Tuesday, Wednesday, it's just couple sessions a day, maybe 3 sessions a day. It's getting the meals really, really dialed in, the calories for the weight cut, checking his weight constantly, making sure everything's on point, making little adjustments here and there. Then you go into Thursday and you've got to start dropping the weight. So usually Thursday afternoon or Thursday early evening will be the last meal of the day or last meal, depending on where exactly his weight's at. Friday you make weight. obviously that's not an easy process. And then we have a very kind of regimented refeed, rehydrate, get everything back into where it needs to be. And then, of course, Saturday morning, wake up, train, warm up, visualize all that sort of stuff throughout the day, go through the pre-workout, the pre-fight procedure, and then fight. But the biggest thing I'll stress is just the consistency is always there. Every camp that we've done has been the same process. It's in a different city, it's a different opponent, but the process, the foods that we eat, the times that he trains, the drills that he's going to do, just the schedule he's going to follow, everything is the same. And that's really, really important for consistency and performance. And I think that's one thing you see a lot of fighters, sometimes they look great and sometimes they don't. But you've never seen DJ look terrible. You've never seen DJ come in completely out of sorts, because everything is the same. The athletes need to get used to the structure and the process. So it's the same warm-up, it's the same foods, it's the same drills, it's the same schedule, it's the same everything every single time, because you want your athlete to perform consistently every single time. So the biggest thing I would say is trying to develop a system, a fight week system, writing down notes, keeping track of what you're doing, keeping track of where your weight's at, keeping track of what you're eating, keeping track of times you're training, keeping track of heart rates. Everything should be going into building this consistent system that you can just do over and over and over again. And that's why you see DJs now, I think 2 fights away from breaking the all-time record of fights, title defenses. And it's largely because just that consistency in training, that consistency in approach that leads to consistently high-level performance. He's never come in and just looked terrible and fallen apart, because he's gone through the same process, and we know the process works, he trusts the process, and he comes in ready to fight. And that's what it comes down to, is that system being in place.
Well, 2 things that you said there. 1, trust the process that guys like you and Matt have put into place. 2, the consistency of that athlete to do the work, the necessary work day in and day out. I always say that's the X factor to success, is the consistency. So, and a lot of MMA fighters have a tendency to not even have that consistency. So it's nice to see a guy like DJ, who clearly must be a student of the game, to be as exceptional as he is. Now, I want to switch gears.
Just Matt, So I would say he's a student of Matt, and Matt's the student of the game. So that's really what you see. You see that connection, that pair. It's unbeatable.
I love that always returning back to that head coach comments. That shows me the respect that clearly you have for him as well, and what you've seen the system do.
And exactly, you can't argue success, and there's a reason that DJ is where he's at.
Yeah, well, and Dan Paff always says that success leaves clues, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very true.
So let's make a quick switch here, and I want to talk about. I had 5 of my coaching staff that went through your weekend course, the HRV, the BioForce course, where you really go through a lot of the system of the book that you developed, that you came up with, and now I understand you're going to have an online portion of this course, which, again, this you can read Joel's book, and there's still a lot of questions that you have, or some maybe things that are confusing, but after going to the course, like I could sit there with your book and listen to you present at the course and really go through and go, oh, that's what he meant here when he was talking about this. Can you talk to us, a little bit about your passion towards HRV and your experience with HRV that ultimately led you to the development of BioForce? And then why don't you give our listeners a little bit of an idea of what to expect in your online course that you're going to have?
So BioForce is really the evolution of a technology I was first introduced to as a young coach. So back in 2000, I want to say 1 or 2, I was introduced this technology called HRV by a friend of mine, Randy Huntington, who's another tremendous track coach that no one's heard of. An amazingly successful coach. He introduced me to this technology, and really what it allows you to do is just personalize things. It allows you as a coach to get information about your athletes that you really can't get otherwise. It allows you to see what's happening inside their body. It gives you clues. It gives you information to make better decisions, because it allows you to see their recovery and their fatigue and their overall fitness changing in ways you really wouldn't be able to otherwise. So 2011, I developed a mobile app that essentially was able to leverage this technology and give, again, it's about giving coaches information to make better decisions, to personalize. Because I'll tell you the one thing, there's literally just one thing that I've seen time and time again from the best coaches, and it's their ability to give that athlete the right thing at the right time, consistently, over and over and over again. Whether you're talking about Charlie Francis, Dan Paff, Matt Hume, Holmgren, all those coaches are able to personalize things and give the athletes what they need when they need it. It's not guesswork, it's intuition and years and years and years of experience. And so it's difficult to just have overnight, but something like HRV gives you more information to help personalize that process. So that's something that's been a big part of my coaching career. It's allowed me to see things in athletes I wouldn't have been able to see otherwise. It's allowed me to learn about how people really respond to training, about what overall structures work the best, what structures don't work the best, all those sorts of things. So, as you said, the book I wrote back in 2009 has a lot of information in it, and I wanted to be able to take that information along with what I'd learned through HRV and be able to give a course that would kind of help coaches put pieces together even more and go through practical application. So, as the course you came to, it's the BioForce Certified Conditioning Coach course, and I wanted to put together all these elements of how do you coach combat athletes, how do you coach tactical athletes, how do you coach team sport athletes, how do you coach conditioning athletes, what does that process look like? And so I went around for about a year and a half. I was in Denver, I was in Australia, I was in the UK, I was all over the place, and at some point I decided, I'm going to take this information, I'm going to put it online. I can do more work online because I was limited to 2 days in the live courses. So we shot about 12, 13 hours of video. There's 55 videos in the course, 300-page workbook. And like you said, it just goes into how to practically apply all this stuff. And I go through how to create programs for all these different sports. I go through all the training methods I use and show people how to do them and maybe give a little bit more detailed instruction than I could in the book. And again, it's really just about putting those pieces together. So, when we did it around all over the world, we'd have 50 to 100 coaches in some locations, and they gave great reviews, and I got a lot of feedback, and I just kind of kept refining and adding to it. And so the online version is really just a culmination of all that. It's literally the last 15 years of my career put together into one course. And it's what's exciting about it is I'm going to keep adding to it. So we're going to make it available a couple times a year. Every time we make a new version available, we're going to add a couple hours of content. I'm going to add whatever new methods I've learned, and everybody that purchases it, enrolls in it, is going to get access to new content. So I don't see this as
nice.
I don't see this as something you get and then you go through and you're done. This is something that's going to be constantly evolving. As I continue to learn, as other people come into the sphere and they had something to add, we'll keep adding to the course. And I see this as just the evolution of my career and of what I have to help share with people. So it'd be great to get someone like yourself in there next time, and we're going to keep adding to this course. And I want to just make it the most comprehensive, well-organized overload of conditioning information that helps coaches get better and deliver better programs. And that's what it's all about.
Well, what we'll do here is we'll make sure we actually put the link on as well. But why don't you verbally give the address or how they'll be able to find the course?
Yeah, so again, the course is open November 14th through 17th this time around. You can just go to 8 Weeks Out, the number 8weeksout.com. And I believe the exact address is /conditioning, let's see, what is it? Conditioning Coach Course. Sorry, it's conditioning-coach-course. But if you just go to 8weeksout.com the week of the 14th to the 17th of this week, you'll be able to just click on certification and you'll be able to enroll in the course there. So, again, this course is going to open up a couple times a year. I'm not quite sure when the next one will be, but we'll just keep adding to it. And every time it comes out, we'll add more information. Everybody that's enrolled in the last version is going to get access to all the new information. And really, it's a live sort of certification where the more we learn, the more we're going to put in the course. We're just going to keep the ball rolling. So I'm excited about it.
That's awesome, man. Well, Joel, I appreciate your time. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I know it's precious, but I want to thank you for joining us today. But really thank you for everything that you're doing for the industry and for coaches like myself. Keep up the fantastic work, and look forward to seeing you again real soon.
I appreciate being able to talk to your audience. Thanks again for having me on. It was great to see you, like I said, a couple weeks ago, and I'm sure we'll see each other again soon.
Yes, sir.